Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back. My name is Christopher Ruocchio. I'm the author of the Sun Eater Science Fantasy series and a 7-year veteran of the publishing industry. And I think this will be the last time I say that 7-year thing, because it'll be 8 here next month. So, looks like we've got some familiar faces here. Falling outside the normal moral constraints, straight from the culture. Awesome. Welcome back. Christopher, spelled incorrectly. Good to see you, sir. Daryl, Orion, Zin, Anthony. TL, welcome back, everybody. And today we are here for a very special occasion. We're here to celebrate the release of Ashes of Man, Book 5 in the Sun Eater series. It came out on Tuesday. Had a signing here in town over at Quail Ridge Books, which is my local store. And that went very well. Had like maybe 40, 50 people there, which is great. I was saying when I was there, when I did the first signing for Empire of Silence, it was like mostly, family and friends. I think there's like one reader, right? And now that proportion is starting to reverse. So that is very cool. Local emo, welcome back. Just made you abandon Danzig, so sorry about that. Mike, welcome back, sir. First time caller, long time listener. Yeah, indeed. You've been a guest on the show, man. I just curious how one goes about getting your books. I mean, I pay for them and they never show up. Yeah, so I heard about that. So look, what I think's happened is folks have ordered signed copies from Quail Ridge Books, which you can do if you go to the link down below. What probably happened is I signed like 200 of those sons of bitches on Tuesday, and there are like 4 people who work in the shop, so they might just not be caught up yet. I know some folks have gotten theirs already, so it'll probably just be another couple days, and it'll be on its way. So sorry about anybody who is waiting on their copy, but they will be coming. I promise. I know some folks got them already. But no. I know you're kidding, Mike. But it's worth explaining, man. Because there are probably some other people who have that question, along with other questions such as, I live in Australia. Where is the audiobook? And the answer is, I honestly don't know just yet. I've got messages into the publisher. It's probably a licensing thing. It'll probably be another little while. So I appreciate your all's patience. But the book is available now wherever books are sold in audio, at least in the US and Canada. But in hardcover ebook as well. And in the UK, you can also get a trade paperback because the UK publisher does trade paperbacks as well. Let's see, who else is here? Dan is here, Treebeard. Dan flew down from Canada to be at my signing, which was pretty awesome. Good to see you, sir. He also, if you want to see that signing, you can go check out Dan's channel over at Treebeard Book Reviews. He recorded the whole thing. It is over there. So let's see. We got a super chat here from Falling Outside the Normal Moral Constraints. He says, cheers to another great Sun Eater book. Congrats. Thank you, sir. Good to see you back. Let's see. Jelana. Brendan Fester on the internet on Fridays, but we sister and mom are here. Well, hello, and hello to Elise as well. And Brendan is, wiser perhaps than I am, but this was the only day this week I could make it happen. So glad y'all could make it. Sir Galahad with the important question, Sir Hector Oliva novella, and the answer is no, probably a novel. I don't know when, but Hector, of course, little minor character, makes an appearance here in book 5. Most obvious bit of backdoor piloting that I've done in my career. Setting him up for his own sort of thing. I think I might do kind of like a military sci-fi thing with him at some point down the road, right? This does not mean that there is an outline or that is the next book. It literally is set up for some point down the road, whenever that may be. I'm trying to talk less about specific pie in the sky ideas that I have, but I will tell you that is something that I would like to do eventually. Let's see. Cameron says, my copy is still on the way. Will this be a spoiler stream? It will only include spoilers for previous books, particularly because it's very hard to not talk about Kingdoms of Death. I'm sure someone will bring it up. So I will not be going into spoilers on the new book at all, right? It's only been out a couple days. I know some people have finished it already, but that is no reason for me to go and ruin it. So I'm not going to do that. I will probably read a little bit from it here in a bit, but I figured I would greet the chat first. Usually it takes, 5-10 minutes for people to filter in. So I thought I would, address some things here from the chat first, and then we'll do a little bit of a reading, but not too much, because actually that tends to shed viewers when I do that for whatever reason. I guess you have the audiobook already. But yeah, so let's see. Rishi says, Quailward said they'll have all the books shipped out by Sunday. So there we go. Yeah, no, I figured it was just them, kind of being overwhelmed, right? They don't usually have to do 200 orders of something at once. I think I'm probably the only author that this happens for. There are a couple other authors in the area. I know A.G. Riddle is local. He's like a huge name. But I don't think he does this through the store. I think I might be the only one who has this particular arrangement. There are a couple other people. There's a YA writer who's also local and who signs in there a lot, but I can't remember his name. Books something about Nyx, I think. I don't know. Like NYX. Anyway, let's see. It's Christopher. It's pronounced Oliva. Yeah. It's named after a couple of musicians that I like, actually. John and Chris from Sabotage. Let's see. 6 chapters in AOM, 100 pages, and not much has happened, but I do love it. Yeah, this one has a little bit of a slower start, right? So this is worth talking about, right? For folks who don't know, which is probably not most of you who are here, because if you've been around on the channel, you know the story already. But this book was not supposed to exist. This book is the second half of the novel I wrote originally, which was just called Kingdoms of Death. And most of the material in this book, holding it backwards, most of the material in this book didn't really exist. About the first 20 chapters or so wasn't really here. So really, it was just the sort of back section that was already done. And there was a little bit of a transition from the culture stuff at the end of Kingdoms of Death, and then into the stuff with the planet Ganelon, let's just say. And so that happened, pretty directly. But that didn't happen, right? Because the cost of paper was so high. They split the book on me. It turned into 2 books. So I needed to kind of gin up a whole first act here. But the problem is, that I lost my train of thought there. But in any case, so the problem was that this was not structured like a normal Sun Eater novel, right? Usually there is, a 100-year gap or something between things. We have a pretty clean start to the action. This one, as you will see, picks up, and I'm only spoiling like the first sentence here, picks up literally the night after the end of Kingdoms of Death. So we do not have the the big giant time skip. There's not a lot of missing stuff, and as a consequence, the pacing is a little bit different. So this is quite a strange Sun Eater novel, I think. I won't lie to you, I was a little nervous about this one because I thought it got the tough end of the deal in the split. Fortunately, it seems like, once again, I don't know what I'm talking about. Everybody more or less seems pretty happy with the book so far. And it's got like a 4.8, 4.9 over on Goodreads, which is great. It's early days yet, so I'm sure, the haters will come. But, that's okay. So let's see. Allie, good to see you. Catfight Paradise, welcome back. You are at the old restaurant right now. Awesome, man. I should come hang out. It's been a while. Good to see you here, though. Hope you're doing all right. Nathaniel says, have to say, after finishing Ashes of Man, it's definitely the best book I've ever read, and so painful. Gosh, Nathaniel, that's a hell of a thing to say. Thank you, sir. I am sorry that you were in pain, although making you all suffer is, of course, the point, right? So I'm glad at least that part was working out. Let's see. Benson, welcome back. Just started Ashen Man yesterday. Howling Dark, still my favorite. Very excited reading so far. Awesome. Glad to hear it. I'm also a Howling Dark, stan. So it was just the most fun to read, to write rather, of all the books. So I totally on board with that feeling. Let's see. Swarmlord says, love the book. Binging the course of a few days. Look forward to some Star Destroying and Genocide in the next book. Yes. We are getting some revenge here soon. So Steels and Havoc coming, really, someone asked me to write Hadrian did nothing wrong on the title of their book when I was signing things. So it's good that the Berserk meme is spreading over to Sun Eater Land. So that is cool. Let's see. Embrace the split. Yes. That is what we have no choice at this point. So If book 4 and 5 was going to be one book, what we would name it, it was still called just Kingdoms of Death. That title, right, because it's part of the Carlisle quote that Empire of Silence is from, needed to be in the series originally. At first, it was going to be the title of the last book, so that like sort of the quote encompassed the whole thing. But really, it was sort of a better fit for book 4, given that we are, in among the Cielsen in book 4. So things got moved. The title Ashes of Man had to be sort of generated on the fly because I needed to split things. So that was the new title. It's Kingdoms of Death. Really, after I named the title Empire, after I changed the book, the title of the first book from The Murdered Sun to Empire of Silence, Kingdoms of Death was the only title that was really locked in. Howling Dark, Demon in White, Ashes of Man all had to be sort of found along the way. I find that it's very hard for me to think about a book or a short story or project really at all unless I have a name for it. And even if it's not the final title, very, very often, especially with chapters, I change titles a lot. Even titles that have been in the outline for months and months will get changed because I'll get there and I'll be like, this is not good enough, right? But I do need a title to get started. So they've all had, goofy working titles, not quite as goofy as Blue Harvest, right? But Return of the Jedi, of course. I need something so I can think of the story, or the book as a thing. So, but Kingdoms of Death was the only one that was really ever locked in advance. I just thought it was going to be a later book. Let's see. Some more support for the split. Very cool. Zin reminding everybody that Howling Dark contains the words Rainbow in the Dark, which it sure does, which does make it pretty cool. Richard with a good question. How much work went into the split? Any more behind the scenes details? How much of a pain was it? It was not easy, but I also don't think it was the hardest thing I've had to do in editorial. The hardest thing I think was I had to edit Demon in White in about 3 weeks. Which was not fun. One of which was supposed to be vacation. So yeah, that was probably the toughest one. This was not so bad because Kingdoms of Death was virtually unchanged. The first half of the split, it only got, I think, 1 chapter added to it basically, and the last chapter got reworked a little bit. Ashes of Man, on the other hand, really needed a beginning, and that was not super easy. So this book was harder than the first half, right, than Kingdoms of Death, because of the split. But I had a lot more time to deal with it. Kingdoms of Death, book 4, it's still hard to talk about this, just logistically. But the book 4 part of the split, right, that needed very little work, but I only had like 2 weeks to get that done because by the time I was told this had to happen, it was getting to the point where if I didn't turn it in very, very quickly, you're noticing a trend here. Then they would need to move the date. This is part of the trouble with writing these very long novels and trying to turn them out on about an annual basis is that there's not a lot of play in the joints when it comes to these deadlines. And even when I am very, very early, other people in the process have found a way to bleed all of our spare time away. And so I've usually had to pull out some editorial miracles and get these things turned around. But this one I had like 4 or 5 months to write the rest of it, which is about how long I usually have to write a whole draft. And all the sort of final act was more or less done, right? So that wasn't so bad. Still, I much prefer to write books in linear fashion, right? I much prefer that things go smoothly and write chapter 1, 2, 3. I'm not one of these writers that likes to jump around and like, oh, I feel like writing chapter 17 today. That'll be cool. Because there's so many like little details, right? Has somebody, like, I don't know, broken their arm, or is this character wearing their hair a different way because something happened that is a lot easier to lose track of if you're not writing in a straight line. So I much prefer to write sequentially rather than jump around. So yeah, so that was probably the tough part. It was just not was having the back half written, and then because you want to try and avoid rewriting as much as humanly possible, right? At least I do, because I hate rewriting. Editing is my least favorite part of the job. I much prefer. I really like outlining. because I like to tell the whole story in some form, even if it's not presentable, so that I know, where everything's going. And the stakes are very low on outlines because I'm the only person who ever has to see them. So that's really fun. And I like writing itself, but I don't like editing. I don't like any of the post first draft stuff. I hate reading back through the book to find all the terms for the glossary. I hate putting together the glossary. And I hate doing like the copy editing is annoying, right? Reviewing all the little notes. And then by the time the proof comes around, I've read this book like 800 times. I don't want to read it an 801st time. So proofreading is not super fun. I love everything up through the first draft, and then everything after the first draft is a pain. So I try to minimize the amount of work I have to do editing, which is one of the reasons I outline, right? So I outlined all the new stuff that needed to get added basically. And I had like, outline notes for all the chapters that were intact, because it was the case, right, that like some of the stuff, the journey really from Nessus to, or rather from Colchis to Nessus, and then from Nessus to the next planet in Ashes of Man, there was some of that already existed, but I needed to insert chapters in between and stuff. So that was very tricky. So not being able to do that in a straight line, but it still took less time than writing a whole novel would have from scratch. So for all of the headache of negotiating this, right, the end result was that I had 2 novels come out in AD 2022, and that makes me look really, really fast, right? Even though I really wrote 1 novel and then like kind of revised it, because I don't know that it was necessarily that much more work than an intensive rewrite would be, right? I've never really, except for the first book, been handed an editorial letter that said, I hate it, fix all of these things. My original editor on my first book was a lot harder on revisions than my second editor has been. And so I've had, had to do a lot more work on that one. But since then, so this is maybe the hardest book since revising Empire of Silence was. But because most of it was sort of already written in advance, it wasn't that bad. It still took less time than it should have. That's a really good question, Richard. I kind of rambled on for a little bit, but let's see. Benson. Oh, the cover set for the audiobook version of AOM on Audible. I have my guesses, not 100% sure. Who is this? It says it's supposed to be Valka, as far as I know. I have nothing to do with the audio covers at all. They just sort of send those up. So the first time I saw that was when it went up on Audible. So actually, I saw it when it went up on audiobooks.com. Sorry, I got distracted reading a comment here. But yeah, so I don't have a lot of input on those, or any input really. But I believe the plan is for it to be Velka. So I have to say I rather like this one. The Demon in White one of the audiobook covers is still my favorite though. But they just sort of do their own thing over there. So but this one's not so bad. Let's see. I appreciate it. A chapter may be titled "The Murdered Son" in the last book as a throwback. Maybe. You never know. You never know. I've got chapter titles penciled in, for the whole last book here. But things can always change. So got a super chat here from Orion. Thank you, Orion, for $15. Christopher, as always, thank you for sharing these stories. It means so much to you with the rest of us. Congratulations on Ashes of Man. Well, thanks, Orion. Thank you very much. It means a lot to me that you all are here, and thank you for the super chat as well. Final book called Murdered Son, maybe. The final book is not called The Murdered Son, actually. All the other titles haven't had articles in them, so no thes, no a's, so that title is out. I suppose I could just call it Murdered Son, right? But as you say, but it's not gonna be that. Outlining is my favorite part too, Josh says. Yeah, no, it's the best part, right? Because like I say, the stakes are very low, right? You can tell the story quickly because you're doing a chapter in maybe like half a page, right? So you can actually really get all the ideas out and down at a speed that's satisfying, at least, right? It's more like actually telling a story. And because when you're actually writing, right, sometimes I've had this problem a lot working on book 6. There have been several chapters where it has taken me days and days and days and days to get through a scene because some of them are just so complicated, or I have very high standards, right, for myself, right? So there have been scenes and whole chapters that I've rewritten like 3 or 4 times, which is actually kind of unusual. There's usually 1 or 2 of those a book, but book 6 got very, very difficult very, very quickly, both in terms of its content and in terms of all the inside baseball stuff that's been kind of in existential stressor on the project, right? We've been back and forth, was it going to be 6 books? Is it going to be 7 books? Who knows, right? And that whole sort of game of badminton has slowed the whole thing down a little bit. But I really love just being able to sit down and be like, I'm going to get through like 5 chapters today, right? Because those chapters are going to be like half a page long in the outline. It's great. Let's see. Zen says, apologizing for hurting us after repeatedly taking joy in hurting us and expressing glee that nobody has guessed right about book 16 seems a tad insincere. Of course it's a tad insincere, right? An artist's public presence must always be at least a little bit insincere, right? Because you have to say things like, oh, I don't know, like, what do you think? And, the meaning to that is open to interpretation, when of course it's not. I just want you to think about it. Right? There's always a correct answer. And so, there's always a little bit of insincerity. I do not want the books to actually traumatize people, right? I don't want someone to have like night terrors because of something they read in the book. Like that makes me feel bad, right? But I do want you to be like, wow, that, made me cry or moved me or like made me think about stuff in a way that was kind of existentially nauseating, right? Which is a complex feeling, but like if I can get you there, that's good. So like that's all fine, but I don't want anyone actually like feel pain, right? If the book like hurts someone, right, in some way, like that's not the goal, right? I can't control that. I'm not responsible for it. Sometimes people are just exposed to things that are personally radioactive, but I'm not a fan of like posting content warnings on literature, because then people would be even more inclined to prejudge literature than they already are, right? But but I still don't want to hurt anybody, right? So, but as far as you are concerned, Zen, and I know you were joking in the first place, your pain enervates me. So, Lily, welcome back. Already started book 5, immediately hooked. That is awesome. Glad to hear it. Glad you're back. It's good to hear from you. I saw the picture in the Facebook group, so that's very awesome. Glad everybody's getting their books out. Josh, when you started book 1, did you know the ultimate ending? Yes, but it's sort of a question of like how much of the ending, right? I knew the part that's in book 1, right? We're gonna go blow up the sun, right? I kind of knew somehow we were getting there, but it's one of those things, right? We talk about outlining and then we talk about like discovery writers, right? Planners, pantsers. I kind of hate the P words, um, but it's a false dichotomy, right? Because planners discover, right, as they're outlining, and so there's a lot of stuff that that you figure out as you are outlining. You get some details. You might have an idea for a subplot. Like I'm still inventing world building like now, right? To make things work, and the trick is to make it all look deliberate. That's where the craftsmanship comes in, right? Coping, right, in carpentry, right? The word coping comes from carpentry. You can see coping, here, right? This is coping, and it is hiding the fact that these panels don't perfectly fit into each other, right? And so you do a lot of coping when you write novels, right? You sort of hide stuff in the joints and make things work, right? It's the same principle. So I've been working my way into that ending the whole time, even as I invent new stuff. Well, I have failed. Jay says I have traumatized him. Well, I am sorry if you were actually traumatized. Sorry, I'm making light of this, but I know Jay a bit here, so it's you're supposed to obviously suffer reading literature. That's one of the points of it, right? But it's therapeutic suffering, right? It's cathartic suffering. So you know, Lily says I'm gonna need a lot of coping with the series. I hope in the sense, that you have to cope with it, and not in the sense that we need more coping to hide my sloppy work. Um, sorry, it's I just thinking about building the office, right? Was we've done all of this ourselves, my dad and my brother and me. It really is a process in building something. You continue to hide the screw ups of the earlier steps, right? When you like mud the drywall together, right? You're hiding the screw holes and stuff. And you have to paint over all of that, and then you do all the rest of it, right? So working with stuff is a sort of a process of covering things up. No, I figured you meant emotionally coping. I just I was still talking about talking about carpentry. Because like writing is like totally a trade, right? It's a craft, and there's this tendency to think of artists like this kind of magic that artists do, and that's like complete nonsense, right? Like anybody like can get better at telling stories if they practice, right? Now some people have like natural sort of talents, but that only like helps your starting position, right? So it's totally something you work at. Anyway, I am rambling slightly. So Allie also had nightmares reading books, so I apologize for the nightmares, Allie. So let's see. We've got a couple more questions lining up here. Sir Galahad with a really interesting one, frankly, one that I had not considered. Do houses like the Bourbons keep their traditions, primogeniture and Salic law, or would succession be more like succession for House Marlowe? As I say, I hadn't really thought about that. What I will answer your question with another question. Are we certain that these Bourbons are the same actual Bourbons, right? Or are they LARPers? Now, some of those houses probably are legitimate, but some of them may not be. And so that is another point that we should consider, right? Because at a certain level, right, the Solid Empire is fake, right? They don't know they're fake, but so that is just another thing to think about. I'm not saying the Bourbons are necessarily fake, though. I'm not naming names. It's just another thing to think about to cover up the fact that I don't have an answer to that question. My instinct is to say that basically all succession in the Imperium works the way that Hadrian's and the Aventine House's succession work, which is to say that you pick your most suitable heir, and you can do that kind of at will. This is sort of a version of how sort of Roman adoption kind of works, right? If you look at like the Antonine dynasty, right, the good emperors, right, they would adopt their sort of chosen heirs. Now, in all but one case with that dynasty, right, and it was the bad case, they were not blood relatives, right? Hadrian was adopted by Trajan, but they weren't. I don't think they were related at all. Might have been like a distant nephew or something. I can't remember. Only Commodus was Marcus Aurelius' son, and we all know that was terrible, right? So it did not go well. But with the Solid Empire, right? Generally speaking, like the emperor looks at his 130 children and is like, well, the old ones are all probably out because we don't want them to be just ruling for the next 20 years. We want to get a few centuries on this guy if we can. And then they'll pick the most qualified of the bunch, right? And that usually allows them to sort of groom them for the role, right? Which of course is why a certain somebody is being dragged around by his father in these later books. And let's see. Jay asks, can we get any hints on the upcoming big announcement? Sure. It will fix one of the problems, at least temporarily and in part, that you all have been badgering me about. So stay tuned. It's not a perfect fix, but it is an awesome fix. And I think everybody will be very, very happy. So stay tuned. I think maybe you'll hear about that in like the next 2 months. It might be 3. We'll see. Working on it now, but it's hard to get anything done this time of year because everybody is taking breaks, right? And rightly so. They should take a break, right? But it's hard to give you an estimate on when you'll be hearing about this stuff right now because we are sort of stalling out with the holiday. The holidays really starting here, imminently. Let's see. Graham, welcome back. To both you and Ami, if she's there. Congratulations on the book release. Question: have you and Kieran talked about the final book cover? And if so, what does he think of your ideas for the cover? We haven't yet. That's a little bit down the road. But I am working on some stuff with Kieran right now. related to the Anderita Books editions. Actually, we are getting some stuff done for the lettered editions, because if you missed the Lesser Devil and Other Stories and Queen of Ashes and Other Stories, you will have a chance to get a copy of them again here fairly soon when the lettered editions go on sale. Those are going to have slipcases, and the slipcases are going to have house symbols on them. So we're supposed to work with Kieran soon to get some of those designed. Um, so that's very cool. Um, I know you're not bound by YouTube quotations, but I do think you did say once that the Bourbons are the real deal. I probably did, and they probably are. But yes. So, but it's not to say, right, that some of these houses might not be reconstructions. To a certain note. I hear the name Commodus and think, are you not entertained? Yes, that Commodus. Real guy, but fake story. Um, Pretty good movie. Very bad history. Um, Grab hardcover news. Is that the big announcement? I haven't said what the big announcement is. The clue I have given is as far as I will go at the moment. But we'll see. Let's see. Are there still any Cielson alive at the present day after they mostly died? The answer is totally yes, right? Hadrian has said as much. You might have missed it because it's very brief, and it's actually fairly early in the series. But there are still some Cielson who survive. They're not completely wiped out. They are completely taken apart as a large scale existential threat. However, by the end of the series, right? So this is one of those things, right, where I'll get these reviews where people are like, it's totally implausible that this whole alien species will be gone. I'm like, well, I agree, right? Actually, it was in the book, guys. But yes, so um, no, they're still around. You'll also notice that there might be a detail in Kingdoms of Death that also addresses this question quite directly. See if anybody can remember what it is. Pop quiz. If anybody knows what it is, put it in the comment. You will win a prize. That prize is absolutely nothing. But if anyone remembers, so yes, we will see. Um, yes, as Zin says, some of them are still living as imperial thralls. And also, Hadrian does mention a sales and slave trade in Howling Dark. Yes, it's never really like to scale, right? It's not reciprocal, really, because the only people who really bring down sales and world trips are like the Empire, right? So, and when they do that, they're mostly just wiping them out, or blowing up their world ships wholesale. So, if there is like someone owns a Cielson slave somewhere, it's probably an extra Solarian for starters, right? The Empire is pretty big on just getting rid of them, and it's probably like no more than a handful. So, um, but yeah. Well, Zin, you may not remember it, but there is a little note in there. It's not explicitly saying they're still alive uh after the Battle of Gododin, but there's a note there that I actually don't think I've seen anybody have make a point about. So I'll be curious to see if anybody's caught it. Let's see. Josh says, first of all, Hadrian's fourth wall breaks are my absolute favorite parts of the series. They're kind of mine too. They are very fun to write. So you'll be happy to hear I wrote one today. So setting up some stuff here for the end. But yeah, so no, it's great, right? Because it's really like the whole point of this sort of style of storytelling, right? The first person thing really lets you use time and the narrator in a way that you still kind of can in third person, but it's a little bit less personal. It's also very unpopular these days, right? Like people don't do the third person narrator that's sort of an active character in the books, right? That's sort of a fairy tale kind of thing, right? And we don't see a lot of that. Really. Tolkien kind of does it a little bit more so in The Hobbit than he does in Lord of the Rings. But where he will sort of editorialize and as Tolkien really writing about the characters in the setting. But you don't really see it a lot. So let's see. Face Peace, welcome. Last book was so good, man. Just a slaughter. Please keep it up. Ready to binge on this one. Are you getting approached shows, movies, video games? I am not. I'm sorry to give you a downer answer, but there is nothing like that that is on the radar. But if anybody out there is watching, I am available. So, I no, nothing. But it would be very cool to do that sort of thing. Particularly, I think video game would be really fun. But I grew up with them, right? Not everybody grows up with television and film, right? But I have a particular fondness for video games. So fingers crossed. Um, Let's see. Graham, there's a new character in Ash's Man. I'm excited to know more about, keeping it vague, but I'm curious, are you intending a standalone series for this character? If you're talking about Hector, we may have talked about this before you got here, but the answer is yes, eventually, right? Hector is sort of being set up for a return to this setting and to this war after I do some other stuff. So it's sort of a down the road thing. Whatever I'm going to do next is going to be a little bit more removed, I think. I'm not saying it's outside the universe, but they won't have any. It probably won't have any familiar faces in it, unless I change my mind, because I have been known to do that. But the current plan is to do something over there. I don't know where there is. It could be the other side of the galaxy, or the distant past, or the distant future, but it'll be over there. Probably won't be a fantasy series. I'm not leaning that way at the moment. So, uh, but yeah, I will probably return and deal with Hector at some point in the future. That is definitely the plan. Um, let's see. There's a lot of stuff in the books that really is set up for future projects or side projects. Whether that's just referencing something that's a short story, right? Or referring back to these novellas, or even to stuff that like nobody reading it as guest is a setup yet, right? So we'll see. Uh, let's see. Josh says, amazing you break the wall, but also keep the suspense and mystery surrounding the events he's referencing. I am really glad that it has been working, because you totally can ruin stuff that way, right? I think, I really do think, for as much as people like to make fun of him, I think Hadrian's sort of hyper dramatic personality is kind of what lends itself to the style. If he weren't such a drama queen, right, it would be very hard for him to just announce these things and walk away. So I do think it's a function of his personality to a certain extent. Um, but like, this is the cool thing, right? Is that you can in fact just say things, right? Like refer to a battle, right? Or you can just drop a little world building detail about a dragon or something, and people are like, "Ooh, there's a dragon somewhere," and their brain does like so much of the work for you in those moments. I'm a big sort of believer. I talked about this at the signing at Quail Ridge, right? That like really readers do more work than writers do, right? Because like I can say the room is green and not describe anything else, and your brain is like figuring out like, ooh, what kind of green, right? Is it wallpaper? Like I don't know. Your brain's doing all of that without me having to do that much, right? And that's true of like seeding plot elements as well, right? You can set stuff up and people will have decided, like all Tolkien really had to say was like, mention like Rune or Harad, right? And you and I have like a pretty concrete, notion of what Rune or Harad is like from looking at its placement on the map, and like, oh, they have giant war elephants, right? So my brain is like, oh, they're like Carthaginians, right? And you can do that with like a couple sentences. It doesn't take much to give the reader really a strong concept of whatever the thing is. And so that's one of the things that makes those little future nuggets, I think, so effective, is it really doesn't take much. And if you don't say too much and you kind of pull back like Hadrian does, I think that's how it works. Um uh yeah, signing your video game would be awesome, Zin. I agree. Um Nick says, on the last chapter of Ash's Band right now. Love learning more about the Jodians. Yeah, the Jodians are super fun. I'm very happy to have them play a role again. Be very vague, but they're great. Yeah. So okay. So Graham, you were talking about Hector. Cool. Um, I wonder what theory that might be. I totally suspect that I know, but let's not talk about it. I want to try and keep spoilers relatively thin here. So um, I think what I will do now is read just a little bit from the beginning. So I've reached the bottom of the chat, but we can go on for a bit. So I'll read just a little bit right from the beginning, and then I will come back and do some more questions to give everybody a chance to catch up. So this is from chapter 1, The Sails of Charon. Day. Day was breaking over dark waters. Colchis's white sun still low and golden at the horizon. Salt wind blew lank hair from my brow, stung my face. In the end, I had not left Gibson's tomb with Valka and the others. They had gone down to the old camp by the shore, had left me kneeling in the dirt before the new raised cairn. The oldest tradition held that the body of any lord must, after the Cathars had washed it, embalmed it, and cut away the organs for the canopic jars, lie in state for 3 days, and that his heirs should keep vigil the while, sleeping in shifts if they slept at all. Gibson once told me that my father had done so alone, kneeling in the chapel at Devil's Rest before the body of Lord Timon, my grandfather. I could not remember my grandmother. I could remember my grandmother, Lady Fuchsia, lying in the purple chamber set aside for her. We had not been permitted to see her, though we had. It was in that violet chamber that I first met death, and the stench of her has never left me. We did not have 3 days for the proper vigil, nor any cathars or canopic jars. That was just as well. Palatine Gibson plainly was, but he had died a scholiast, and the strictures of their order prescribed that all scholiasts were to be burned, their ashes scattered to the winds. Ashes. There were no ashes, as there was no time. I had taken all the time we had. Had I slept there, kneeling on the hard-packed earth, or only dreamed? I had seen a different ocean, had watched it recede along a shore of crushed bone. Mirrored night stood silent sentinel about a bed draped in red silk in which a man lay dying. A woman with eyes like black suns sat draped in cloth of gold. The vision turned, and Doriaika, the Shiomu Ilusha, strode along beneath the colonnades of the eternal city, Vati and Atavaisa beside it. It turned again. The emperor's face smiled down at me then, as if in a kaleidoscope. And as if in a kaleidoscope split in two. I blinked and saw Alexander's face and mine looking back at me, each of us on golden thrones. The ocean receded again, waters running from my advancing feet, and I stared out into darkness, a square of darkness framed in light, blacker than anything I had ever seen, blacker than the stones of Annika, blacker than the howling dark. A window onto night. Why should a darkened window fill me with such fear and sorrow? I blinked. Through it all, I remember the salt wind raking, tousling the tall grass that grew along the black edge of the bluffs. White caps glowed orange in the night off the glow of the gas giant Atlas, whose limb hung low over the horizon, vaster than any moon. It's time to go, Had. A hand clapped my shoulder, and turning from Gibson's cairn, I blinked up at Paulino. The old myrmidon grinned down at me, grizzled as when I first knew him, the scuffed old leather patch obscuring one eye. You've been at this long enough. I didn't hear you coming, old man, I said, going to one knee. It was only then that I remembered Paulino was dead, and found myself staring up at empty air. I shut my eyes, opened them again. I was alone. My knees ached from the kneeling, and my body complained as I struggled to rise. My ruined shoulder protested, and I used my left arm, the arm with hollow bones, to push myself to my feet. I could scarce remember when last I had been so tired. It must have been that first night aboard the Ascalon, after Velka and I had escaped from Acteramu. Thinking of Acteramu, of Paulino, who had died there with so many thousand others, and of Doriaika's coronation, darkened the newborn day, as though grey clouds buried the pale sun. But I reached out and laid my hand, my 3-fingered right hand, upon the top stone of Gibson's cairn. No words came to me, no final speech, no promise. What could I say to him that I had not already said, that he did not already know? Nothing. I only pushed the dew from the top stone, bearing the faint inscription that I had made there with the point of my fishing knife. I smiled down at it a long moment and raised my face to the sun. It was time. I think I'll just stop there. Let's see. Allie asks, what about a vintage Sun Eater choose your own adventure book with corny illustrations? I am in. Let's do it. That would be fun. Let's see. I do think it's funny that they made a reference to Karen before Ashes of Man came out, and it's in the title of the first chapter. Yes, but it's also a really bitchin' song. So, got to keep up the music references. So, oh no, the Dark Window is right. Crying for Pal, also quite right. Let's see. Still hurts what happened to the Red Company. Severian says, welcome, Severian, by the way. I saw you came in just as I started reading. At least Siren got out before they went into the shredder. That is true. She caught a break, as did as did Switch. It actually turns out that being banished was probably good for him. So yeah. Like I said, this one picks up like immediately after the end of the last book. I've been thinking, because like the joke is, or rather the talking point has always been, I'm going to go fill all of these story gaps, right? It's like, what could I possibly put between these two books, right? And the answer is actually no. So this one isn't even that bad. Sir Galahad says, is the story Pits of Emash supposed to have come from Switch, at least apocryphally? And the answer to that question is, I can't answer that question. That is a mystery. We have no idea who that horrible historian's source might have been. Although we might have an idea, whether or not it's true is another question. So I leave that to your deductive reason. Daryl says, after you write the last Sun Eater book, will you be doing another series again, or focus more on single novels? Now, this I can't answer. I will probably be doing a single novel next. Whether or not that single novel will turn into the first novel in a series, right, or feature a character who will reappear again is another matter. But the plan is that the next project will be a complete story in one book. The books are also going to get shorter. They're probably going to be like 150,000 words, up to maybe 200, which isn't that much shorter than this is. But I don't plan on writing any Demon and Whites again. It is not the the climate has changed, and whether or not readers like long novels, it is very, very expensive to print them, and writing shorter with the next thing would serve my career, frankly. It is wiser. So if any of you are looking to write, right now, my strong advice would be to write like no longer than 150,000 words, and to not pitch anything longer than a trilogy. Just because it is very, very unlikely, unless you get that first book out and it sells, Brandon Sanderson numbers, that you'll be able to see a 12-book series through. The fact that I, made it this far is a minor miracle in this climate. And I don't make Brandon Sanderson numbers, but my books are also half as long as his. People think that like Demon White is a really, really long book. It's still shorter than a Game of Thrones. It's just the way it's printed has made it appear longer. Then the song is about the Greek myth to a certain extent. So it's we can all win. We can all win. Good old Scorpions. But speaks to the quality of your work. Lauren says, "Well, thank you, Lauren. It's very kind of you to say." But anyway, about the series length. Yeah, it's things have been going very, very well. That so many people are invested. Yes, that's been very cool to see. Especially with this release. Sorry, I'm trying to like guess like the rest of the sentence. I shouldn't do that. It's a bad habit, but I feel like I should keep going at all times when I'm on these things. But no, it's been very, very cool, right? I mentioned my first signing because the only real book signings I've done, less one tour I did with Dave Butler, have been at the one bookstore, right? So it's the only real data point I get for for this sort of thing, really. And the first one, I had maybe 80 people there, but it was like all family and friends and like old school teachers and things like that. And one reader, Emily Grace, if you're watching, you know who you are. It was good to see you again too. She was here at the last one, but as things have gone on, like the second signing was like maybe 30 people, and it was like maybe there were like 5 or 6 readers, but it's still mostly family friend support. And now it's like it was more readers than family and friend support at this last one, which is really really cool. So, and of course, with BookTube and this channel, right, which I guess is part of BookTube, even though I'm not really sort of I'm not like reviewing books or doing anything like that, except when I complain about things, but it's been very, very cool to see, more and more people sort of jumping in and getting involved. And that's all super, super awesome. Hopefully, I should have some, some numbers here next week and see how we're doing. Because so far, each book's done better than the last. Kingdoms of Death almost doubled Demon and White's launch numbers. So I'm hoping things will, continue in that direction with this book. So it did get 2 #1 orange tags on Amazon, right? Which doesn't mean as much as it sounds like, right? Because Amazon has these really small micro genres. But I got #1 in like Galactic Empire science fiction, #1 in hard science fiction, which Zin was making fun of me for. I didn't pick it, man. Pretty sure Daw picked it for me, and I agree. It's sort of a weird category to be in, but that's where they put me. Argue. Let's see. Face Piece asks, how did you go about getting the voice guy for the audiobooks? Do you get to choose or do they throw a dude at it? What programs do you use when you write? So I did not really go about getting the narrator at all here in the US. So there is a little bit of variation between my publishers. In the US, Recorded Books picked Sam Roken, and they said, hey, it's going to be this guy. At the time, he only had like 2 novellas that he'd got on Audible. So I think I was his first novel. Might have been tied for something else, but it was pretty early. Now he's doing like Elric, which is pretty cool. I'm not a big Elric fan, but like it's cool that Hadrian and Elric sound the same, right? So that's neat. So they picked him for me. In the UK, they came to me with 2 names, and I sort of Hail Married and said, hey, I really like John Lee. Would you pick John Lee? And they said, oh, yeah, sure, no problem. So John Lee read Empire of Silence for the UK publisher because I'm a huge, huge John Lee fan. He's one of my favorite narrators. He did like all Alistair Reynolds books, right? He's tremendous. Really cool guy, too. We talked back and forth a little bit because he messaged me directly about pronunciations, whereas I've been going through the producers here in the US. He couldn't stick with the series, though, because he was like, I think he was playing Malvolio in 12th Night, right, on stage, so he couldn't do it. And they moved to, I think, one of the guys who does 40K, I think. What's his name? Saul Reichland, and they might have changed it again too. I'm not sure because I can't really get the UK audiobooks because I have US Audible, so I get region locked out of those. So the short answer is it depends on the publisher. In this case, I had a little input on one and no input on the other. There are times where the author, like especially like independent publishing, where the author will produce everything him or herself, and so either handpick the narrator or even read it themselves. But it just sort of varies. It depends on how the publishing thing works. Let's see. Nick, when will we get to see the galaxy map? Hopefully very soon. It's been very, very busy over here in Ruocchio land lately. And so my wife and I have just not had time to sit down and get them posted on the website. It's done. It's ready. We just literally have not had time. It's just been one thing after another. First week of this month, we had like a social engagement literally every single night for like 9 days. Right, so like a week and a half of just crazy stuff. So I know I've been talking about it for too long. This is why I should stop talking about things in advance. But it'll be soon. God willing. Zin says, heard a lot of discussion for Philip Chase about how trying to become an author in traditional publishing is like winning the lottery 3 times. It sounds super tough. Yeah, my friend Alexi, who I did that one stream with, has this whole system of like hurdles that you have to clear. I can't remember his system, but it's, a sort of visual metaphor, right? Because you have to write the book in the first place, right? Which is very, very difficult, which is why, because like everybody, knows at least one or two people who tries to do it and just never finishes, because it takes a long time. It's the sort of thing you have to work at every single day, right? It's like, it's like a diet, or well, it's like any hobby, really. You have to like water the plants every day, right? And if you don't do that, it doesn't get done. So that's the first thing. Then you have to get an agent, right? There are a couple ways to get traditionally published without one, but like, boy, like that is a really, really small target, right? So you have to get an agent, and that's difficult. I was rejected 51 times, 52 times, one of the two. And that's like super normal. That's even low. And then they have to then get a publisher on board, which is not necessarily easy either, because it might be a difficult sell, or the agent may think your book is amazing, but like maybe you're one of those people who wrote a 300,000 word novel. Almost nobody gets a 300,000 word novel out the gate. When I sold Empire of Silence, it was not a 240,000 word novel. It was a 120,000 word novel. My editor made me make it bigger, right? I was talking about how that was a really difficult revision process. So I was not trying to sell a 250,000 word novel. If I had been, my agents told me no uncertain terms, I wouldn't have even taken you on as a client if you told me your book was that long. So another reason why you really should not write giant books. Like everybody wants to be Robert Jordan, but like Robert Jordan is the only Robert Jordan. Like nobody else has a gigantic fantasy epic that is as famous that's 18 books long, right? Like, Malazan's pretty long, but it's not that long. And even there's only really a couple of those, right? So the problem is like the top of the genre is super hard to duplicate. Like you're not going to get to be, Tolkien and be Tolkien with your first trilogy, right? It's almost impossible. And you're certainly not going to get to write, or these sort of giant things, right? So we look at the Pat Rothfuses and the Brandon Sandersons, the Robert Jordans, and say that's what I want to do. But really, the odds that that's what you're going to be allowed to do, even after you clear all those hurdles within publishing, is very, very low. I have a friend who plans to write like a 15-book fantasy series, and he's being traditionally published now. And I just am not sure that's going to happen. I just don't see the publisher, unless the sales are amazing, right? I would love to be wrong because he's a good friend, but I just don't see any traditional publisher going for it. Let's see. Lily says, I'm newer to your books. My first time seeing was with you and Mike. Discuss the Dune movies. Instantly bought all your books up till that point. Thank you so much. I really owe a lot to Mike. Mike, if you're still here, he knows I owe him several drinks. But it really was Mike's reviews that helped sort of like double the audience size here. Because when I started doing these live streams, right, and I had 500 subscribers, I was having like 4 people watch. And we've got 30 right now, which is not 100, but is way more than 4. So, that is pretty awesome. And this is still, this one of the bigger crowds I've had. So, very, very awesome. And I also like, shot myself in the foot by not making YouTube videos like I want to. It's just one of those things. It's like write YouTube video, and I always choose write, which I hope you all will forgive me for. Even though it might be in my interest to do more YouTube videos. So let's see. Graham says, might be in the minority. Hearing book 6 will be long. I feel your plot twists and climaxes hit harder in the bigger books, but I enjoy the shorter books too. I do think that is the single reason why everybody likes Stephen and White so much. I think it's just because there's so much stuff in it that everybody is aware of the fact that they just got a really, really good deal, right? It's like, getting a large pizza for $5, right? At somewhere that isn't Little Caesars, right? So it's like good pizza. Because that's right, Zen. I'm making fun of bad Italian food again. Actually, for budget pizza, you could do worse than Little Caesars. But it's still not really good pizza, bro. I was making fun of jarred tomato sauce a couple days ago, and no one will let me hear the end of it. Yes. So let's see. Severian with the big question. Do I have an estimate on when we might expect book 3? Yes, it will be Q1 2024 unless something goes wrong. I have had I've had assurances that that will be the season that it is in, right? Publishing has 3 seasons, right? It's got spring, summer, fall. There is no winter because, as in fashion, winter is not sexy. So, it'll be in the first 4 months of 2024. Don't know which of those 4 months yet. Probably won't be January because January is a bad month to try and sell something in. So I would imagine February or March of that year will be the time. So let's see. But yes, it will be in that season. So hard sci-fi as the story goes hard. That is going to be my answer from now on because Zin keeps making fun of me. So I'm going to say that next time. Christopher, have you noticed any changes in your fan base from when you first released Empire of Silence and now you realize Ash's Van? Size, engagement, haters. Really, so like really for all of my like poking fun at my critics on Goodreads, like I have had very, very little, almost no negative attention at all, right? I partially that's because I don't like get into fights like some writers do. I don't say silly things like Tolkien shouldn't be sold at Barnes and Noble. So I don't have a Twitter, so it's very easy to avoid being in trouble. So I don't get into I don't have a lot of haters, which is good, right? They're the people who are like, oh wow, this is just like Dune, and that's fine. Like it is just like Dune for like 4 chapters, and that was on purpose. So I'm glad you noticed. So that hasn't really changed, right? In fact, it's probably those guys have gotten less noticeable because everybody who sticks through book 1 realizes that that is wrong, or rather is shallow. There's a very surface level thing that you notice there. And they get to book 2 and they're like, oh yeah, this isn't remotely. There are no hand monsters that live in lakes in Dune. And then they move on, right? So actually, I think things have gotten more positive over time, right? Which is really cool. For size, absolutely, right? Once I started, hanging out with all the booktubers, like really got a lot of readers here. Empire Silence just passed 1,000 reviews on Amazon, which is very awesome. If you haven't left a review or even a rating for the series, please do, especially over on Amazon, because the more reviews, ratings they have over there, the more likely Amazon is to actually put them in emails and send them to people, which is great. We can harness the algorithm, we can, in a sense, go viral. That would be a big help. And as far as other differences, it's a bit more online now. Like starting out, I would get a lot of emails from people. And now I get, Discord messages and Facebook messages and Instagram, which like I barely use Instagram and I still get messages like all the time now, which is very cool. I should probably like use it more, but like I don't have a lot of pictures besides artwork. Hopefully that will change, sometime soon. But yeah, so that's really it. Like it's certainly gotten to be a larger audience, which is great, and I think a more positive one. Um, and it's cool too. I'm like noticing I don't have to answer questions sometimes because like people will have already answered in comments or chats or something, and I won't have to be the only person, holding my hat, so to speak. Um, let's see. Dominic, hey man. Do you have advice for outlining chapters that occur in Act 2 of a story? How do you balance character development, plot twists, seeding future plot points, and driving the story to climax? So this is going to sound like really pat to start, right? But just make sure you put all of that in there, right? I don't really know that, like, in my mind, like Act 2 is really any different than dealing with Act 1 or 3 or 4 or 5, depending on how you think about it, right? Because I don't really think in a 3 or 5 act structure really at all anyway. And in part that's because like I never really let's take 5 act structure, right? Like what do you do with the like do denouement and falling action don't really need as much attention as the other 3 acts. It just sort of feels funny, right? And so I sort of just never thought that way. I just sort of think, we're going, like this is a story here, this is a story there. So if you're hung up on specifically the fact that it's an Act 2 issue, maybe just try not to think about it that way. Just think about where your characters are, right, and what they're doing and what the next goal is. Because if you find that thinking about this is like an Act 2 thing is the problem, maybe change the frame. Right, maybe think of that act as a complete story in itself, because acts are complete, right, in terms of action, right? I usually call them arcs actually when I'm outlining in my own head. And that might be the growing up a manga reader thing, right? Like this is the golden age part, and this is Lost Children, this is Conviction, right? And so I think of my story really as having like look at Demon White, right? There's sort of the setup, right? The Godot through Godot, and then there is the bit with Yubalu, and then there's the bit back at Forum, and then there's Colchis, and then there's Annika, and then there's Berenique, right? And so for that book especially, I was just sort of thinking in terms of location, because with this story, right, when I leave a location, I leave a lot of stuff behind, right? A lot of the characters, a lot of the like time itself gets left behind, right, to an extent, because there's like a huge sort of gap in moving away, right? It's not going to really be the same place when I come back. And so I always think about like setting the stage anew, right, when I return to a place. So Colchis in Kingdoms of Death is not Colchis in Demon and White, right? It's like a different setting, almost in a sense entirely. Like the stage kind of got packed away, and then we loaded out. So maybe think about Act Two like it's Book Two, right? Where does Act Two start? What is the climax of Act Two, right? What is the resolution, right? And then think about it that way, rather than thinking about it as sort of the middle part of a story, like Lord of the Rings, right? Each of the books, with the exception of kind of Fellowship of the Ring, right? But actually, really looking at just Two Towers, it's very, very clear. Two Towers is just two books, right? It's the Aragorn stuff, and then it's the Frodo stuff. Right, and those stories don't interact in that novel at all. So there's no point really in thinking about them as together in any real sense if you were to be Tolkien and you were outlining, right? Those are just two separate things. So maybe apply a similar process, and maybe that will help. Uh, let's see. Did Peter F. Hamilton's books? I think that's Lee, right? Lee is great. I agree with you, Richard. I love I love Sam Roken, but John Lee's also great. John Lee only did the first book. He only did Empire of Silence. There's a different guy who did the rest of them over in the UK. But if you can get that John Lee recording of book one, it is of course excellent. Not that Roken is not, but John Lee is also great. Just like I said, he was one of my all-time favorites. When Roken started, he was like new, so he wasn't on my radar at all. Well, let's see. Graham, can you tell me how the year of the Sun Eater has been for you? So many releases. I'm curious how it's been from the author's perspective. For readers, it's been Christmas all year. Well, I am glad to hear that it has been Christmas for you, but it's been really good. It's been good for me. We've had two novels out. There was a novella, a short story collection, and I think 3 anthologies. Plus the like special edition thing going on, right? So that was a lot of stuff. There's always something to talk about, which is good, because I didn't run out of material doing updates or updating people in the streams and things like that. So there's always something going on. Next year is going to be comparably Spartan, right? I've got the Lorien novella will be out next year. I don't quite know when, because I haven't started it yet. It's going to happen after book 6. I'm going to finish book 6 the first couple months of the year, and then I am going to move on and do that. So hopefully by like June or July, it'll be out. My hope is that it'll be out in June, and that I'll have it ready to go by then, because I expect to be a little busy personally around summertime. So my plan is to have it out by then. Tales of the Sun Eater Volume 3 will probably be out later next year as well. So those will both be out. And then I plan to do some like other stuff. I want to do hardcovers of Lesser Devil and Queen of Mid-Ashes, because Amazon allows for hardcover editions now. So I'm gonna work on that, but I want to get some new art and edit things. And I know a couple of the ebooks have like table of contents issues, so I want to get those all fixed, right? That should be easier. And then of course there is the Secret Project, so stay tuned for that. And there'll be some more Anderida Books editions, but there's no like new novel next year. So it'll be a little bit thinner, but I also think but it'll be really busy from a writing perspective, because I will have to do book 6, and there will be another book that I have to work on too after I finish the Lorien stuff and some short stories and Secret Project. So it'll be a busy year, but it's just it'll be kind of sedate in terms of releases, and 2024 might be more like this year again. So we'll see what happens, because this is like a job, right? Like if I don't work, like I will not eat, like the Bible says. right? So so I need to do that. And of course, as we've already established, I like the expensive tomatoes. So we need to make sure the money is still coming in so I can afford my good pasta sauce, so that Zen can continue to make fun of me. But no, it's been really, really good, right? I got to do a couple conventions and see people and get back out there again after years of that not happening. And no, this year was awesome. It's still the year of the Sun Eater for like 2 more weeks, but really the last 2 weeks here are just about enjoying book 5. If enjoy is the right word. So I hope everybody does. And I just want to say thank you, since you've given me the opportunity, Graham, to everybody, for making this happen. Because I really actually can't do this without you. If nobody is buying these things, I don't get to do this. So I just know that I'm very aware of that, and grateful to each and every one of you. Whoops, didn't mean to bring that back up. Is that friend the author of Master of Sorrows? It is not. And I actually haven't talked to Justin in a long time. I think that's supposed to just be a trilogy. I may be mistaken. But even if it were, I would say no, because I don't want to name names. But no, I should talk to Justin. I should have him on a stream. We should do something. I haven't talked to him since like 2019, I think. I've seen him since 2019, at least. He wasn't at the last Utah convention. Let's see. Glad to hear Mike get praised, because I found the series because of him. Mike will always get praised because he is a golden god, and he requested I write that in his copy of Ashes of Man. It was funny. I was sitting there signing all these books, and Treebeard was hanging out with me, and he was like, "Did Mike get a book?" Or did you give him one? And I was like, "Maybe he got one. I don't know." And then, like 2 books later, Mike's book shows up, and he says, "Hey, will you sign? Mike, you are a golden god." I'm like, "Oh, this is Mike's book." So, perfectly on brand. Caitlin's still waiting on my copy, but super excited to continue this great series. Well, thank you, Caitlin. It should be with you soon. I don't know if you were here when we discovered, I can't remember who it was, said Quidditch Books told him that all the books will be on their way by Sunday. They just had a bunch to work through. So it should be on its way soon. I'm assuming you got a signed book. Sorry, making an assumption there. Possibly Amazon is just late. Good pizza does require charcoal or wood fire. That is correct, Zen. You and I are friends again. I don't have a good pizza oven, though. I've been trying to convince my brother he should get one, because I don't really have a yard. So I live in a townhouse. But am I afraid that the last book is going to be too long and you'll have to split it in 2? No, not really. I think the things are pretty set at this point. Let's just leave it at that for now. Galahad says, "You do way more on YouTube than 99% of authors. We all appreciate that you focus on writing." That is true. I just want to really capitalize on the fact that no other authors are really doing this besides Brandon and Pat Rothfuss and Brian Lee Durfee. #1 television show in all of television, if you ask him. So, let's see. It says he's not making fun of me. He just thought it was funny. What's the difference, man? Totally cool. Elise said, "You may have heard this elsewhere, but author and interesting thinker J. Kitsun mentioned your Sun Eater series as an example in his email newsletter." Oh, did he? We used to be like Twitter friends back when I had a Twitter. Tell him I said hi. We would go back and forth every now and then. I haven't spoken in a long time, but let's see. Ooh, 2024 will be exciting with Sun Eater 6 and Stormlight 5. Oh no, I'm competing with Brandon again. No, I mean, obviously, I don't think Brandon actually hurt Ash's Man in any way, but didn't Last Metal come out 3 weeks ago or something. If any series other than yours is going to have hand monsters and lakes, then Dune would be it. Maybe. I feel like that's more of a Gene Wolfe thing, but you're not wrong. There's a chance. Man, my brother read Dune like all 6 of them, for the first time in, like, I think this year or maybe last year, like since the movie came out. And man, I was not expecting him to like God Emperor of Dune as much as he did, but he, like, it is his favorite book, right? And I was like going into it, like he he it wasn't really the kind of story I thought he'd like. He's more of like a Guardians of the Galaxy kind of guy. And I was like, look, God Emperor of Dune is freaking weird, man. There's a worm and clones and like an army of like Amazon ladies, and Duncan is very, very grouchy. It's strange. It's strange. There's the mountain climbing scene, which we try not to think about. It's a weird book. And he's like, dude, that book was amazing. And I was like, oh wow, okay, you're correct. It is the best Dune novel. But man, I was just not expecting that. Because man, Dune does get so damn weird. First book's like is already kind of weird, but it's within the normal tolerances of science fiction weird, and then it just goes. Um, oh, Swarmlord wins. This is the answer to the question. Was the note in Kingdoms of Death pertaining to my earlier question? When Doriaika talked about a couple of Cielcing world ships didn't show up to the meeting and were still independent. Yes, I missed that question. If I think I missed that question. If I did, it did not register for me. Like I've already forgotten about it. So if I did not answer the question, Swarmlord, please do just ask it again, and I will take care of it. But I did miss that. But yes, that was the detail. Some of the Aita did not even come. So there are some fully intact clans that are out there, but it's like very small ones, right? Certainly nothing on the order of what Doriaika's got going on. So the Empire will have some, David Ayer's Fury style mop up operations to carry out after Gododin. But uh, are reviews on Amazon not connected to Goodreads? I kind of assume they were. No, fascinatingly, they are separate. Goodreads does not provide the review scores for Amazon items at all. I have like 5 times as many Goodreads reviews as I do Amazon reviews. So one of the videos I keep wanting to make is like ways that readers can help their favorite writers, which is totally self-serving, but should also help other writers. And one of those things really is Amazon reviews. Amazon reviews are really, really a big deal. As Amazon accounts for something like 50% of all like book sales in the U.S. And that's like print books. Something it's approximately 50%. And so leaving those reviews there really, really helps. That's why like it's my default link that I use. I hate to do that in my newsletter and things. But it's like the easiest way to make sure someone will actually click through because everybody uses it. And you must, play the game. So, uh, yeah, no, they're totally separate. Carlos says, been watching some of your interviews on YouTube. They're always interesting. Well, thank you, sir. I hope they're never boring. Congratulations. Thank you, Brendan. Glad to see you here. Raxus, when are we going to get this premium Christopher Ruocchio tomato sauce recipe? I joked that I should absolutely make that video because it would be funny. Science fiction authors, totally normal tomato sauce. I will say I am a big fan of doing the like oven roasting version because it's way less likely to burn, and I want to walk away for 2 hours. I don't want to sit there. So it is not actually the like grandma's Sunday sauce sitting there for 4 hours stirring recipe. I have done that many times, and the results are probably better, but I don't always have 4 hours on a Sunday, So big fan of oven roasting them, but you got to get the proper tomatoes, man. San Marzano, that's the way to go. And good ones if you can get them. Although Kento is totally fine if you Cento. I have no idea how actually that brand is said. They're pretty solid. Well, that's the important thing, and that's uh, still about the price of the jar of sauce. So you're not going out of your way. Congrats, thank you, Dominic. Good to see you again. Silver Red Stormlight. Me neither, Zen. I have not read that. The mountain climbing scene, lol. It's so uncomfortable. There are a lot of very uncomfortable scenes in those latter Dune books. Frank was getting weird. Very, very weird. Um, you should totally, totally read the rest of the series though. At least through God Emperor. I usually recommend that people, if you're gonna read beyond the original book, right, you should at least read the first three because Dune Messiah doesn't do so well on its own, in my opinion. It was sort of conceived of as the fourth act to the original novel, but it's really, in my opinion, the first act of Children of Dune. I think that's a more sensible way. So if you're going to read past one, read three. And if you enjoyed three a lot, read four. And then only read past four if four was like your favorite thing. Because five and six don't really have an ending. I Brian and Kevin's ending is not, I think, really what Frank had in mind. Um, their vision of what the Butlerian Jihad is not, I think, Frank's vision of what the Jihad was. Personally, I could be wrong about that. It's possible Frank had a different idea than I think he did. But point is there isn't really a Dune 7 because the Kevin and Brian version is not, I think, correct. So only read 5 and 6 if you like really, really, really like what's going on, because even still they are less good. Heretics and Chapter House Dune are they're a big step down from those first four, in my opinion. But yes, yeah, Galahad's agreeing with me. At least read To God Emperor Dune. You say you're not making fun of me, Sin, and then you bring up the thumbnails on the shorts. I am not allowed to pick those, as far as I can tell. I looked for a long time. I know those thumbnails are very cursed, believe me. There's a reason I haven't done a third one. Let's see. In prime condition, who would win in a fight between Crispin and Hadrian? Pre-time betting, Hadrian, of course. We're talking like Demon and White Hadrian to like post Lesser Devil Crispin. Probably still Hadrian. Crispin's bigger, but Hadrian is frankly meaner than he is actually, and that matters a lot. Let's see. Book arrived today from Quail Ridge. See, they are going out. Awesome. Glad to hear it, Joe. Thank you for reading. Didn't take much time to sign it at all. Happy to do it. Controversially, but quite correctly, Galahad does say that Miles Tegg is the best Doom character. Miles is awesome. He's almost as good as the other Miles. No, he is great. He is the best part of those two kind of Final Doom novels. They're just really oversexed. Those two last novels are just, the Honored Montres are just weird. It is very, very peculiar. Frank was into some stuff. Zin, it's okay, man. It's fine. Aragorn always wins, though. That's the real question. Aragorn can beat hundreds of people at once. We're talking like Homeric levels of excellence. So no. Aragorn is the best. Aragorn would probably beat Conan, man. Like, just the amount of achievement that Aragorn actually pulls off in the text is it implies that he is the best. Pretty clearly, I think. Wilfred asks, just started reading Sun Eater, loving the story so far. How many books are planned for the series? At the moment, it is 6 books. And barring any unforeseen circumstances, it will be 6 books. If there are unforeseen circumstances, it will be 7, but that's it. Rax says, I like your YouTube shorts. I like them too. I just can't figure out how to make them not cursed. So I need to spend some time and figure that one out. Mike swears there's a way to do it, but I can't figure it out. So I need to pick his brain and figure out what I'm doing wrong. Let's see. Andrew asks, do you have any ideas for something along the lines of a Kickstarter to release special editions of your series, since hardcovers are so hard to find for your earlier books? I would like to do something like that, but we will have to wait and see. It's one of those things, right? Like, I am not a publisher. I haven't figured out like paper sourcing and printing and stuff like that. But I absolutely would like to do something like that. So I just need to get the right situation. Because the other thing that'll happen, right? Like I've got Anderida Books in the UK, right? They've done the 2 collector's editions now of my short stories and my novellas. We are going to do a the whole series. We're going to do Empire of Silence probably next year. It might be the one after that because he also wants to do one for the 3rd novella that hasn't been written yet. But we are going to get into the series. We just need to get the rights to do that. And the plan is when we do the main series over there, we'll do 1,000 of those per book instead of 500, because so far, um, sorry, I just saw Allie's comment and I laughed. We'll get to it in a second. But the 500 copy runs of those novellas sold out in about, most of them sold out in like 2 days. They sold out completely in about 4 weeks. So we need more for the main books, right? Because those are just short story collections. So the plan is when we do that, we're going to get Kieran to do covers again, but they'll be like different covers, right? They won't just be one character. We're going to do like scenes or something. And they'll be a little bit more dynamic is the plan. So they'll be a little bit more old school because they'll be like, they'll be a little pulpier, but they'll be Kieran pulpy, right? So, I don't know what we're going to do just yet, but maybe the first book is like Hadrian, I don't know, fighting Uvenari, right, or fighting Gilliam, or it'll be a Colosseum scene or something. We haven't quite figured out what the plan is going to be, but we do know that we want Kieran along for the ride. That is the current plan here. So we are at least going to do that. There will at least be Anderida Books editions, and you will have double the opportunity to pick them up. So because there will be 1,000 of them and not 500. That is the plan. So what I was laughing at is Ali said, I'm running slightly behind on live, but I just heard the other miles. Yes, Ali has been sort of running I guess actually running. Sorry, this is your read along. A read along of Los Bujold's Ruocchio series, which also stars a man named Miles, who is the best sci-fi protagonist of all time. I'm not saying that because Miles's publisher said that he was me, but he is. It's official. The publisher said so. So so yeah. No. You just finished Civil Campaign, right, Ali? The Civil Campaign is a blast. It's very fun. I've been like reading, along the notes in the chat, but I haven't had anything to say. So I haven't known what to chime in with. But I am so glad everybody's enjoying those books over there. If you folks haven't read Lois McMaster Bujold's Ruocchio saga, it is one of those 17-book series, but they're really short. The longest one is like 150,000 words, right? Most of them are shorter, but they are excellent. Everybody should read them. They're so good. Let's see. Apparently, Queer Ridge has a gift wrap option. Now I'm super curious. I believe they do just like wrap your Christmas presents for you if you order a book from them. They're a wonderful store, and especially if you live anywhere near Raleigh, right? Like 100%. Like there's no need to go anywhere else. Like that, they're the best bookstore in town, bar none. Lovely people, and I've been really thrilled to be able to help support them too. So let's see. So yeah, no, that's great. Buy your Christmas presents from them. I'm gonna swing back by there this weekend. I gotta take care of some more stuff. Let's see. Keep my eyes peeled for those hardcovers of EOS. Yeah, do stay tuned. Right, at the very least, the Anderida Books edition will be out in the next year or so. We're working on it. So, they're going to keep it up with publishing the UK editions as they come out. The Ashes of Man UK editions signed from Anderida Books will be out I think next month. They figured it's too close to Christmas. We'll just do it after, but they'll be up soon. And the cool thing about them too, of course, right, is they match the numbers. So if you get number 111, they will email you. They won't know. Rather, what they'll do is they will close sales. So if the next book comes out, you can buy your book and say, hey, I'm the guy who got 111. They will check your purchase history with them and be like, oh, you did, and they'll send it to you. So they'll hold your spot for like a month after the new book comes out. So you're guaranteed to get the whole set as long as you stay on it and get their newsletters and stuff. Um, oh yeah, no, a lot of love for Kieran here. Me too. New Kieran art is like my favorite part of the whole publishing process these days. He's just the best. Absolutely love working with him. He's a really nice guy. On top of being just brilliant, brilliant artist. And just real fun to work with too. My favorite Kieran story is still when we were working on Time Troopers, right? Which is one of the anthologies over at Bane Books. It's got a knight, a samurai, a Roman, and like a future like sci-fi trooper going to fight some unseen enemy together. And he was like, "Which Roman helmet do you want? You want like Gallic H or Gallic G?" And I was like, "This is my guy." That's a very very specific question. So I was very very happy. Um, Orion with a weighty question. How do I feel about this discourse with AI generated book covers? Um, not highly, I assume, with an artist like Kieran at your side. Yeah, so I don't. I want to be anti-radical on this issue, but I will open by saying, obviously, robots are bad and should be destroyed. But at the same time, right? It's sort of a mixed bag, right? Um, because it's an interesting tool, it's an interesting technology. I don't understand the point in it because eventually, right, the next move will be there will be prose bots, right? Eventually, there will be bots that do page layout for comic books, and there will be entire programs that generate entire comic issues and entire novels, right? Amazon absolutely wants to create the theoretical infinite monkeys at their typewriters so they can generate titles indefinitely, right? And we will literally create Borges's Library of Babel eventually. And I don't understand the point in creating technologies to replace the things that human beings like try to retire from, like real jobs. Like you all have real jobs, I have a fake job to do. So I don't get that because this is like that's the stuff that we're trying to free up people from so that they can do, right? Like people want to retire and do something like that. um not everybody, obviously. Like some people like want to be a construction worker, or they want to be a doctor. Like that's great, right? I'm not saying like everybody wants to quit and do what I'm doing. That's not what I'm saying. But um at the same time, right, I see a case for like, hey, like this, frees up, people who wouldn't be able to afford a proper artist, right, to be able to produce a product that like looks professional. Right now, I know a lot of people are concerned about the AI like cribbing assets from existing images and stuff like that. But it's not clear to me that it does that in a way that like rises to the level of like actual plagiarism, right? Because a lot of like that Mid-Journey stuff like looks like a pretty like new image. I don't know that that's any worse than like a DJ going and remixing a song, right? By stealing the extant pieces of songs. Honestly, I think that's probably closer to real plagiarism. I think sampling is more like plagiarism than what the AI are doing. But it does trouble me because it's replacing, and is aimed at replacing my job, right? And I think that anybody should be worried about their jobs being replaced by technology in some way. Because I think that like civilization should be oriented toward the good of the people who are members of that civilization. Now, obviously, we have lots of disagreements about what that good means, right? And that's not just an AI conversation. But to the extent that industry and politics are oriented in an anti-human way, I think that's wrong. So I definitely see like you know concerns with this like destroying people's ability to get work. But I personally don't know that I will be using the AI stuff. But I do also think it's cool, and I think like, hey, if that like gets people who like want to get a book cover but can't, the ability to enter publishing, like that's good, right? Because that's sort of freeing up the art that's trapped in people's imaginations, right? And I think that's good. But I do worry about like the details and the execution, because very often with policy or inventions, right, like the invention is kind of morally neutral, right? Like AI is not like Skynet's never really going to exist, right? That's not what AI is like. AI is like what the Butlerian Jihad is like, where you've got someone at the top pulling the strings, right? And the question is like, what is this morally neutral tool going to be used for, and by whom? right? And so that's where I get concerned. So I hope that's it's a bit of a rambling answer, but I hope it's a useful one. I don't want to be too extreme and say one thing or another, except of course that robots must die. But I can see ways in which it would be good. This could be good, but I also am concerned, right, about the ways in which it could be bad. The plagiarism angle, I don't think is the most relevant part of the argument, but I've seen a lot of people lean on that pretty heavily. Um, I hope that answers the question. Yeah, Ruocchio books are great. Absolutely love Civil Campaign. Top fave, which is delightfully shocking. I figured you would like it because it's such like a Regency, like Georgette Heyer kind of romance number, right? Like it's a social comedy. It's very fun. But it's also like she still hits you, with those like strong pathos left hooks here and there. It's great. I am a Mirror Dance fan, as you know, but that's because I am a very dark and dramatic person. So, um, Lee says, just finished reading Bujold's Curse of Chalian and loved it. Very consistent voice. I have never read the fantasy. I think Curse of Chalian is one of the ones that we did not publish when I worked at Bain. I might be mistaken because I know we published some of her fantasy, but I think that's not one of them. But I would very, very much like to at some point. Yes, the EOS hardcovers are pricey. If anyone here does not know the story, that they're out of print, right? So you can only get them used. So the price is going up and up and up and up on those. I think they're like 150, 160 bucks these days. So can you tell that both of us are responding from the same room? Only a little bit, but it it adds to the flavor. Two, is book 6 definitively the end of Hadrian's story, or is it possible we may see him again? Never say never, but I don't have any plans. We'll see what happens. Um, there are already AI that can write scenes from a book. Yes, but they're still not like really there in the way that like Midjourney is really there, right? Those like chat bots too, right? Like, I remember I was reading an article where one guy was like, "Oh man, this robot's definitely alive. It passed the Turing test," and he was like a guy who worked at Google. And the robot, which is a chatbot, like makes references to having friends and like referring to its body and like hands and stuff. And he's like, it's so convincing. Like this robot does not have hands or friends. And before anyone says that we know of, come on, you know what I'm talking about, right? And so like it's clearly not actually sentient, even though this guy is like it totally fooled me. The prose bots are still a little bit goofy. Like I've read those AI generated or I've seen like the Stargate script, right? It's like pretty good, but it's still a little off. But we're probably to where like those chatbots like with an editor, basically, like sure that would be passable. But then we get into my question, right? It's like, what's the point, right? Now, obviously, if you are like, let's say, I'll pick on like, you know, I'll pick on Black Library, right? Because they're the first publisher that has like a brand, right, that I can think of. And you need to produce, all of these novels in your IP, at speed. Sure, like you might turn to robots, right? Like that would be cool. Especially like some companies will do it as a stunt early on, right? Like there will be a Terminator novel written by an AI probably in the next decade, right? It'll still be edited by a person, but like you get the point, right? But it's the question is like really like why though, right? And the answer is because it serves sort of the interest of the people who are making the money, right? But it doesn't serve art, right, as an enterprise, right? And art and business they go hand in hand in publishing, right? But they are two separate enterprises. So I find that disturbing, but well, and frankly, like I'll probably be fine. Like I already have an audience, but I do worry that it's going to make people's jobs a little bit harder trying to start out seriously. Now, I don't think traditional publishing will ever really go for it, except for a couple stunts, right? But I do think like if you're trying to hack it in the indie world, like it's already hard competing against like 2 million books a year. Um, it'll only get harder, I think. Um, let's see. To break in, of course. Let's see. Speaking of Stargate, Orion says, I want to start watching. Is the movie mandatory to watch it before I head into the rest of the series? 100%. 100%. The show is a direct sequel. They recast Kurt Russell and James Spader, and frankly, in both cases, this is an upgrade. Um, that's not fair. Like Michael Shanks is better than James Spader in the role. Kurt Russell's version of Jack O'Neill is completely different from the character in the show. Richard Dean Anderson just like makes him funnier and like very different take on the character. They really do feel like two different people, but they do recast those two characters. There are characters from the movie that appear in the show as recurring characters, and the events from the film like totally impact the main plot. There's a little retconning that goes on in between where they like change some stuff with the aliens, and like Jack O'Neill's name gets spelled differently. They add an L in the show for reasons mysterious to me, but it's totally you should see the movie. The movie is also great. Like Roland Emmerich kind of sucks. That's like the one Roland Emmerich movie I really like. I like Independence Day's okay, but like the virus thing's a little hokey. But like Stargate, the film, they actually like bother to do the language barrier thing that science fiction like never does. Like everybody on in Abydos, right, the planet, speaks like some sort of splintered off version of Egyptian, right? And so they actually have to bother to learn it, and science fiction like never ever does that. The show, of course, completely throws this out of the way immediately. So because they can't do that, right? They can't do that for 22 episodes a season for 10 seasons. Like it would become impossible. So everybody in space speaks English, and nobody ever explains why that is, and that's fine. But the movie doesn't do that. It like actually shows its work, and that's great. So um Elise says, a friend of mine wrote a story for a series where AI robots received the sacraments. It was a difficult premise. His sacrament was matrimony. Yeah, robots like don't have souls, so you can't baptize them, right? Like, and so all the other ones don't count, right? And I am not sympathetic to the argument that like a person is, a biological machine, right? And it's the same thing. I just don't buy into that at all. Robots do not have souls. Aliens might, but robots no. People can say that I'm, being mean to robots, but robots will be mean to you at some point because someone will tell them to be, and they won't ask questions because they can't. So they're not the same. You are bits on a silicon board. I am a blob of meat. We are not the same. But I'm not only a blob of meat. So yeah, looks like we are starting to slow down here a little bit. Should I do another reading? Maybe, but maybe I don't know what I would read. It does look like we're closing in on the 2-hour mark. Why am I looking this far in the book? When I was at the bookstore, I read a little bit from I think chapter 4. I guess I could read some of that. Yeah, we'll just do a little bit of this real quick. This is from chapter 4, Air and Darkness. So I'll read a little bit more, and then maybe we'll take a couple more questions and wrap it up from there, I think. I'll be back, Hadrian said. Help Corvo drive. I'll be back, Hadrian said. Help Corvo drive. And then he was gone, climbed up through the roof of the van. I didn't realize what he'd done until it was too late. He jumped He jumped one of their chariots, used it to shoot down the others, cover our escape. Something must have happened I didn't see. Maybe he circled back to deal with the Conclave Guard's pursuit. Maybe he missed a turn in the tight streets. I was in the co-pilot seat beside Octavia, helping to drive. Bellica did not explain that we were relying upon her eidetic memory to navigate the streets of Adatharad. It was easy enough to gloss over, and it had been her practice not to draw any more attention to her Tavrosi implants. It was strictly necessary. Many were the priors and inquisitors of the Chantry who would have no regard for her status as a Demarcus citizen or for her relationship with me. We made it to the gate just in time, she said. Hadrian was shouting, "Go," on the comm. I thought he was right behind us. He couldn't have been far. I couldn't have missed it by more than 100 cubits, I said, and found Valka staring at me. I fell silent. I'm reading from Ashes of Man still, Raxus. Um, Still early in the book. She is, in fact, recounting. Okay, so maybe I should have explained. Um, this chapter is Valka telling her story from Kingdoms of Death. And it is told sort of from her point of view, but not really. Um, that's why I figured it was safe to read from. Often, when she repeated bits of what she had heard, said before or heard, it was with a tone and inflection uh, replicated as well, a perfect copy, almost a recording, though she played it on her own lips. But there were other times when we were pressed for time, most often, when she would simply recite, let the words run out in their proper order without regard for feeling. Though she had been careful not to call out her Tavrosi heritage a moment earlier, the machine in her was plain enough to see. Numa must have seen it as a scholiast. He was cousin to machines himself and should have known the signs. But neither he nor the governor general interrupted, though I watched them, that old part of me that longed to leap between Valka and whatever threatened her, ready to lunge. 'Twas too late, Valka continued. The doors were shut, but we had a clear shot across the underground highway back toward the starport, or so we thought. The gates were barred when we got to them. Batavia and Polino suggested we abandon the van, and we did. They'd gotten guards into the tunnels by then. We fought our way back to the maintenance hatch, about a kilo back from the starboard exit. Polino mined the door, stopped them following. I could almost hear Polino cursing, shouting for the others to move along. Right on cue, Valka tipped her head the other way. Move it, you dogs, double quick, he was shouting. But I turned to Otavia and said, we have to go back. Hadrian is still in the city. We can save him. She put a hand on my shoulder. I know, Valka, she said, but they won't kill him. He's too valuable a hostage. Better if we reach the Tamerlane. We can negotiate from a place of strength. At that, Valka had relented. The Tamerlane could not have stood against an entire Lothrian fleet single-handed, but she was in high orbit above the Commonwealth's capital and in a position to do or threaten no small amount of harm. We didn't know the Tamerlane was already lost, Valka explained, but we made our way through the maintenance tunnels to an airlock. Padmurak's atmosphere is unfit for tyrannic life, and some of us were without suits, myself among them. We commandeered equipment for the few of us who needed it and cut our way onto the surface. We were able to reach the airfield. It would seem they had not counted on us escaping the underground. We met no resistance, no air support or anything, but our shuttle was gone. Valka seemed to deflate in the telling. Her shoulders slumped in her chair. There has to be another way, she said, not looking up. I started, recognizing the phantom of Polino's voice in the brusque patter of her words. There had to be another way, she repeated, speaking for herself this time. 'Twere 17 of us left by then. We assaulted a hangar on the edge of the airfield and managed to take control of a military freighter. We lost 8 in the attempt. The cheap glass visor of a Lothrian helm shattered under Corvo's fist, and the man within fell gasping in the thin and frigid air. Another fell dead beneath one of Krim's knives, and Polino's plasma burner torched a third. Then Valka came in Lothrian armor herself and hurried up the freighter's ramp amid sparking lights and the foggy mists of coolant hoses. I have experience flying ships, Valka said, and I speak basic Lothrian. We were able to hard launch fusion lifters. We were clear of Adatharad in minutes. 'Twas then we discovered the Cielson. Her hands twisted in her lap, her wine cup forgotten on the table at her elbow. 'Twas not one of their Oskianduru, not one of their world ships. 'Twas smaller, class 7, I guess, an asteroid they'd hollowed out, expanded into the classic spin ship cylinder, perhaps 300 kilometers from end to end. The Tamerlane would not respond. The fingers of her left hand spasmed, flexed, nails bit into the flesh of her right arm. The Tamerlane would not respond. Recognizing the symptoms of Urbane's worm at work in her, I made to rise, saying, Valka, with a force of will, she unclenched her left hand, seized it with her right. Ignoring my interruption, she pressed on. Batavia and I managed to get a ping off her transponder. They hadn't disabled it yet. That was how we found their ship. The Cielson were in orbit around one of Padmurak's moons. The Lothrians had a military base there. It looked like they were supplying the Cielson. Freighters like ours. Octavia inserted us into a high polar orbit around the moon, lost to submit the other freighters. There was nothing we could do. Our ship was not warp capable, and we stood no chance of rescuing Hadrian if we returned to Padmarac. We debated the better part of a day, slept in shifts, but we decided the only thing to do was chase after the Tamerlane. The Cielsen had it almost aboard their ship by then. We joined the Lothrian convoy supplying their ship. When we were close, we diverted, clamped ourselves onto the hull. Weren't you detected? Asked Governor General Dorr. I think I will stop there. So let's see. Yeah, so no, that was a bit from just chapter 4 there to clear up. Valka is telling her story because that was something that we sort of explained in book 4, but I felt was sort of underserved. So had an opportunity to tell her story properly, and a few extra chapters here because of the split. So I figured that was a safe thing to read from, since folks probably have read book 4 if they are here this evening. Let's see. Zin says, just finished chapter 27. Love you for this chapter. I think I know which one that is. And yeah, it was fun. Andrew here says, always wanted to write a novel or story. I always feel too daunted whenever I try to begin. What would be your one tip to a beginner writer struggling to know how to begin? I've said this before, so folks will roll their eyes, but try to do an outline. If you are paralyzed because you don't really know where to start or how to begin in general, it's probably just because you haven't figured out what the story is like, right? You might have a plan of like broadly what you want to tell, but sit down, right, and break it down. Say, like, you don't know how long your book's going to be, right? Say you have, but you've got a plan for the general story, like let's say we're talking about the original Star Wars, right? It's about Luke Skywalker, right? He's a farm boy. His family's going to be killed by the Empire. He's going to join this crazy old knight. They're going to team up with a smuggler and some robots, and they're going to go to Alderaan, but they're not actually going to make it there because the planet's been destroyed. And there's this princess, right? And then they're going to save her. They're going to escape from the Death Star. The old wizard's going to die, and then they're going to go blow up the Death Star with a bunch of ships. So you've got these chunks, right? You've got to get through the part where the family dies, right? You need to tell the princess's story that gets up to the destruction of Alderaan. You've got to get Luke to Han, right? And then you've got to get from the Death Star through to Ben's death, and then you have to get from Ben's death to the end. So you don't know how long your chapters are going to be yet. Maybe you haven't written a lot. So let's say you want to do that pick an arbitrary number. Let's say 30. You want to do that in 30 chapters. So by like chapter 10, you want to be maybe on the Death Star, right? So you have to get all the stuff that happens from that point up to the Death Star in those 10 chapters. So do a bulleted list and say of 10 points, right? And say you need a chapter that introduces Leia, right? And then you're like, maybe that'll work as a prologue. So you do a prologue where Darth Vader storms onto the ship, right? And then you introduce Luke, right? So you do that because you get 10 points. You break that down. So maybe by chapter 9, right, you're meeting Han Solo and you're leaving Tatooine, right? Chapter 10, you are arriving at Alderaan and found out that they're finding out that it's been destroyed and they get captured, right? So basically, they're your 10 points, right? You can imagine how you'd break that down. Then you do the same thing with the next 10 points, right? And each one of those points will be a chapter, right? So chapter, let's say chapter 9, right, is about meeting Han Solo and leaving Tatooine. So that's 2 scenes, really, right? So for that chapter, you would say chapter 9, scene 1 is meeting Han Solo in the cantina and doing all of that. Scene 2 is going to the Millennium Falcon, right, and is the action scene as they leave Tatooine, right? And you do that with every chapter. You break it down into scenes. So what you need to figure out, right, is what your whole story is, and then pick a random number that sounds good to you. 30 is good. 30 chapters for me is about 110, 120,000 words. That's about a normal novel. My novels are long, right? And so start with a number like that, and you'll do the same for the second act, from getting to the Death Star to Ben's death or something, right? And you can totally play with those numbers. They don't need to be totally fixed like that. Maybe you need 15 chapters to get to the Death Star, and you only need 5 to get to Ben's death, right? So those acts might be differently long, right? But pick a number like that and break it down into little parts. Um, and then once you've done that, work on fleshing out your information on each chapter. Like I said, you get those scenes and then make notes in those scenes, right? Like, you could do a point about how it's really important that Han shoots first, right? Because it is important that he shoots first. Because this tells us that he's kind of a scumbag, right? And that he's dangerous and that he's kind of morally neutral in certain ways. And this should make us worried about Luke and Ben. And is Han going to sell them out, right? We could maybe want to play that up, right? Maybe there's a plot in your version of Star Wars where Han does consider selling them out, right? Maybe he goes and reports that they're on the Death Star, and then like has a change of heart or something, right? Like maybe you want to see that. So you make notes in chapter 9, right, about stuff that you want to do in chapter 14, right? And you include that in there. So you would do stuff like that. And so maybe if you've got that, once you've done that, you've got like a page, 2 pages about what chapter 1 is going to be, and you know that you've got Darth Vader coming through the door, right? And he's after the Death Star plans, man. And maybe you want to open with the point of view character being in, like, say, George Martin style, a random, like maybe it's Captain Antilles, right? Maybe he's leading the defense, right? And so we have this horrible sequence of Darth Vader coming through the door that introduces him as the big villain, right? And then he kills Antilles, and that's your prologue, right? So you've got the setup from there, and then you cut to Luke in chapter 1. So once you've written all this in your outline, hey, this is what I need to start the book with, because you will have figured out how that first chapter serves the rest of the book, because you will have thought about the whole thing. Does that make sense, Andrew? It's another really long answer. And the longer my answers get, the less sure I am that they're helpful. But I would start there. I would try to figure out what the whole story is, fractionate it. And you could pick a totally random number. I know how long my chapters are. So I know approximately, hey, if I want the book to be X long, I know how many chapters that I need. And so I will undershoot my goal a little bit these days because my chapters are starting to run longer. So I know I need like 50 chapters to be about 200,000 words. So I'll outline like 45, right? And then I'll find as I go, man, this chapter is getting really long. I just need to break it. And those 2 scenes, like I was talking about, need to be split into separate chapters. So there's like totally some plasticity that you don't have to serve the outline. It can be made to serve you. But I would do something like that and figure out what you want to do. And this will take a long time, right? It takes me like weeks to outline a book. But I do hope, yeah, like give it a try. Let me know how it goes. And if there's anything else, I can help with, send me an email. Happy to answer questions. I might not always be fast, but X Factor says, congrats on the launch. My signed copy from Krill just arrived today. Excited to get to it. Well, thank you. I hope you enjoy it. Raptor says, can't wait to read it. Heart eyes. Thank you. Drury says, I just finished the book last night. Chapter 17, Disquiet Gods, was one of, if not my favorite in the series. Absolutely loved it. That is one of my favorite chapters as well. That is a good one. Disquiet Gods is that's the one. If anybody heard me complaining about a chapter in this book that took 2-3 weeks, it was that one. It was a nightmare, but I'm very happy with how it turned out. So I'm glad that it seems to have turned out well for everybody else too. But hey, we are right at the 2-hour mark, so I will start wrapping things up. If anybody has one more question, we can do one more. But it is getting to the point where my voice is starting to fry a little bit. 2 hours usually my limit on these solo streams. So looks like Zen says I feel if you want to become an author, you should probably lead with your worst ideas, like Brandon did with Elantris, compared to his later work. As when you get better, it seems you get more leeway for your better ideas. I don't know about that. Like, Sun Eater was the best idea that I had at the time. It may still be the best idea that I have. I think maybe. That's not true. I'm really excited about one of my next ideas. Really excited about 2 of my next ideas, but they're not as big, right? They're not 7 books, so we'll see. But that is one thing. I think more often people start with their first best idea. You could really tell with like Nick Pizzolatto, and this is a TV show, but True Detective, right? That first season was clearly something he'd been thinking about for years and years and years, because it is the best 8 hours of television, I think, maybe ever. Besides HBO's Rome, which everyone knows is the best show of all time. But besides that, that first season of True Detective is pure genius, I think. Um, but like the second two seasons are like, oh, he had to produce, a second season because he had an order for it. So sometimes I think people start their strongest ideas. I think that's more common. Raxus says, um, will we learn more about Sun Eater robots? Yes, at some point. Yes. Um, uh, Graham says, can you give a small teaser for these other ideas? And I will say I just did. But that's all I'm gonna say. Um, yeah. Let's see. Congrats, Orion says, and happy reading. I know I've taken more than one question after I said one more question. But I'm a nice guy, I guess. Mostly I'm just sort of compulsive and like there are more things to answer. But we're almost there. Let's see. Ali says, I had to swap my computer in this account, but wanted to say thanks for the stream and congrats on the launch and Merry Christmas in case I don't talk to you again before the holiday. That is a perfect note to end on. Merry Christmas to you all and a Happy New Year. The year of the Sun Eater may be coming to an end, but next year will also be pretty awesome. And I do expect I'll finish the next book relatively soon. So, there's a lot still to look forward to. And not just for me, right? I'm not the only author, unfortunately. I got to compete with robots now. Um, but uh, but no, next year will still be great. So I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas and Happy New Year. And I will see you all again very, very soon. So until next time, everybody, stay well.